The officer behind the desk scanned me with his thermal scanner before nodding. He handed me a slip of paper with a gruff nod, its promise of temporary freedom masking the reality of enduring another day of scarcity. I walked back down the alleyway, my thoughts trailing after the last bit of sunlight. The ration queue was now an endless line of faces staring blankly at the ground, their hands clutching the same piece of paper. I had only a week's worth left for the family, if this system failed again. The blockhouse loomed larger as I approached, its windows like empty eyes watching me. Inside, the room was dim and crowded with workers sorting through rations. None seemed to have much more than a handful. The man at the counter looked up, his expression a mix of boredom and detachment. He shuffled papers and looked up again, his expression unchanged, same as always. I nodded, feeling the weight of the ration box I carried. It was my only lifeline, but how long could it last? Every day brought new queues, new faces, and the same unyielding system that insisted on compliance. A sudden commotion from outside caught my attention. A group of workers arguing loudly, their voices cut through the usual quiet, making me pause in the doorway. I strained to hear what they were saying, but could not make out their words. The blockhouse doors began to slam shut, just as quickly as they had opened. The man at the counter looked up again, his eyes narrowing. "Stay here," he ordered, and disappeared into the depths of the building. Panic stirred within me, a small ember in the stillness. I forced myself to remain motionless, watching as more workers streamed through the doors, their expressions grim. Minutes stretched on, like hours. The silence returned, broken only by my own breathing. Finally, the blockhouse door opened again, and the man emerged, his face pale beneath his uniform. He handed me a slip of paper that was different from the other saw. This one was marked with an urgent stamp. I took it without question, feeling a mix of relief and dread as I turned to leave. The queue behind me had grown thicker, the faces more desperate than ever. As I stepped out into the alleyway, the sun had fully set, casting everything in shadow. What would they do tonight? What life slowly becomes under Imperial rule? Hunt, comply, or face consequences, a poster on the wall outside the permit office window demands. I lean in to read the fine print. Next to the counter, a sign warns that all citizens must register for ration cards by next week or face a fine of 25 credits. A man behind the counter checks my ID and hands me a form. After me, a woman holding a child steps up, her face tense as she waits for her turn. I fill out the form methodically, signing my name under the Declaration of Loyalty. The clerk stamps it and returns it without a word. I pocket the card, feeling a weight settle into my chest. The office is small, with rows of filing cabinets lined up against one wall and a single window that provides no escape. A faint scent of old paper lingers in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of fear from those around me. The room is quiet, except for the occasional shuffle of papers and the distant hum of the Republic's former Senate building. I step out into the bustling street, where posters advertise Imperial benefits and join the Imperial service. Everyone seems to be in a hurry, clutching their new cards or avoiding eye contact. The usual chatter is absent. People move with purposeful steps, as if each interaction could determine their fate. A vendor, selling holocubes, catches my attention with a shrill cry. 25 credits for entertainment, 100 for information. His words ring in the crowded square, emphasizing the growing cost of even simple pleasures. I glance at my new card, wondering how long it will take before compliance becomes more than just a choice. The sun sets, casting long shadows across the street. As I walk home, the weight on my chest grows heavier, pressing down with every step until I can barely breathe. Crowds thronged the narrow streets, their muffled voices and hurried footsteps forming an oppressive hum. Oh, the notice board on the housing block loomed above me, its faded letters barely visible through the smog. The notice board announced a registration deadline for Imperial rations, threatening a fine for non-compliance. A vendor's cry echoed from down the street, his voice rising with each word. "Fresh produce! Last chance before Imperial quotas run dry." The air grew thick with the scent of rotting fruits and sweat. I scanned the notice board again, my heart sinking, as I realized how little time was left. "Citizen Registrar, you must comply or forfeit your rights," I muttered to myself. The queue at the permit office snaked around the corner, stretching like a hungry serpent. I joined it, shoving past fellow citizens, who glanced over nervously. The line moved glacially. My patience thinned as time ticked by. Finally, I reached the window. An Imperial enforcer in polished black armor stared down at me through cold eyes. "Citizen Registrar," he began, his voice a mechanical monotone. "You are required to fill out this registration form for ration card issuance." I took the clipboard and pen, my hands trembling slightly as I wrote down the necessary information. The enforcer watched with unblinking focus. When I handed it back, he scanned it quickly before stamping it with a red seal. He handed me back my stamped permit and told me it was good until next week. "Remember, failure to comply will result in fines." I nodded mutely and left the office, feeling my resolve waning. The street ahead seemed even more oppressive now, the vendors' cries blending into a chorus of despair. A notice board warned of a 25 credit fine for failing to register by the following week. What would I do? If the fine came due, streetlights cast eerie shadows on the worn bricks as I walk through the narrow housing district. The crowd thickens, and whispers carry through the narrow air like damp whispers in old clothes. Transit shuttle checks have become a daily ritual. I step into the metal box, my heart a dull throb in my chest. The enforcer stands at the door, his uniform crisp despite the heat. He scans the queue with a cold eye, then nods me forward. The shuttle is crowded, bodies pressed close as we ascend to the ration desk. Here, the air hums with an electric tension. Well, a single familiar face greets me. The citizen registrar, her clipboard at the ready. She frowns when she sees me, her eyes scanning a list of names. Another delay? Her voice is flat, but there's a trace of impatience in her tone. "We're running behind schedule." "I turn mind to my top. We're stand behind them here. How I begachi. Pet coke show, or down the wall." I take my place in line, the queue stretching like an endless ribbon. The enforcer's presence looms over us, his boots echoing off the metal walls. I can feel his gaze, sharp and unblinking. The citizen registrar marks down a name, her pen clicking softly against the clipboard. She moves to the next name on the list, her pen still clicking softly. Her eyes return to the list as if it holds the answers to everything. "One in Bankshaw. Yet you don't reckon. I'll check out the line now. I'll doubt all now." A woman in front of me leans closer, her voice low but urgent. "We need to hurry. Fines start next week." I nod, my mind racing through the potential consequences. The 25 credit fine isn't much now, but imagine the rations cut off. Or worse, the loss of rights and privileges. The shuttle judders as it reaches its destination. I step out into a crowd where anxiety seems to palpitate in the air. The ration desk is a small booth, its interior echoing with the sound of metal filing, and clipboards tapping. She looks up, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You know why we're behind schedule." Her words are sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "Please," I beg, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to be registered." The citizen registrar sighs, a sound heavy with frustration. She marks down another name on her list and says, "Very well, you're actually up next. Hurry." I hurry back through the crowds, the weight of the situation settling over me like a thick fog. The enforcer watches as I pass, his gaze unyielding. As I step into the shuttle again, the doors close with a metallic snap. The shuttle's hum lulls me briefly, but the impending deadline remains ever present. But the enforcer's presence is a constant reminder that time runs out soon, and the consequences of delay are clear. The ration desk looms like an ominous gate, and behind it the fine waits like a spectre. What if they run out of rations before I'm registered? I'll write it down. Having written down. Warner General. The morning sun glinted off the Imperial shield, emblazoned on the housing district's entrance, casting an unwelcoming light through the narrow streets. I stood in line at the ration desk, my fingers drumming impatiently against the cool metal of a data pad. Citizen Registrar, a middle-aged man, with a stern face and a clipboard, surveyed the queue with growing impatience. "Come on, people. We're falling behind schedule," he growled, his voice echoing in the small space. The enforcer, a large figure in a dark uniform, stood by the turnstiles, his presence an unspoken threat. I felt a tightening in my stomach as the line dragged on. The citizen registrar tapped his clipboard with increasing urgency. "Well, last chance," he snapped at a young mother who was fumbling for her registration documents. Finally, it was my turn. I handed over my datapad and waited anxiously while the citizen registrar checked my details against the system. A moment passed, stretching into an eternity. Then his face turned to stone. "Registration incomplete," he said flatly, snatching back the device. "A fine looms if the registration isn't completed soon." But her almost uncompleted. I felt a chill run down my spine as I left the desk with only a slip of paper in handout. May find notice. The enforcer's eyes followed me as I joined the throngs heading towards their daily transit shuttles, an unspoken threat hanging between us. The shuttle doors slid open to a queue of anxious faces. "This is why we need you all." "Registered," the enforcer barked, his voice barely audible over the clatter and commotion. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path as the shuttle filled up. "Stay back or I'll have to use force." "Already soon. I don't understand there. I hesitated, then reluctantly moved aside, feeling a wave of dread wash over me. The shuttle door closed with a final clang, leaving the housing district silent once more. The citizen registrar's impatience was a constant reminder that time was running out. As I walked back towards my modest apartment, I wondered how many more days would pass before the fine was imposed. Would I be forced to choose between paying or risking a confrontation with the enforcer? The ration desk loomed ahead, its metal surface gleaming under the harsh overhead lights. I shivered as I approached, the coldness of the desk biting into my fingers. "What?" I, narrator, leaned over the glass counter, my eyes scanning the list of required items. The enforcer's stern face was already visible, his uniform a stark white against the dark grey of the room. "You have been fined again, citizen registrar," he growled. "Ah." He held out a slip of paper with my name, and the amount owed. My narrator swallowed hard, shoving down the rising dread. How? The fine had doubled since last week. 25 credits now, more than a Dayar's ration. Are another week without, I murmured, trying to keep my voice steady. "Or, yeah." Citizen registrar produced the funds from a small pouch, handing over the exact amount. "You're winding at a painting, and she go, and testing. Mother, master, Malaysian brow, Arco, Alwan Chow." Enforcer nodded curtly and stepped aside. I hurried through the metal detector, feeling the cold bar of the scanner as it passed over me. The door hissed open, just in time for the last shuttle to leave. "Now!" I rushed to the next queue. "Down, one. New 47 Well, no, I don't many cows." The transit shuttle was a tight squeeze, passengers crammed together like sardines. I managed to find an inch of space near the window, my heart sinking as I realized how late it was. The shuttle pulled away from the station and sped through the housing blocks. The humming of the engines became almost soothing amidst the dread. Yet, even this small comfort was fleeting. The enforcer's cold stare lingered in memory, a constant reminder that compliance was not just a choice, but a necessity under Imperial rule. Back at my apartment, I fumbled with the ration cards for tomorrow. Meager allowance. The enforcer's face flashed before my eyes. A grim warning that failure to pay meant more than just fines. It could mean worse. Our narrator stared at the cards, wondering if there was any way out of this endless cycle of payment and fear. Tomorrow might bring new challenges, but for now, survival demanded every last credit. What would I do when the fine doubled again? Well, citizen registrars, queue snakes around the corner, a slow-moving river of bodies. I take my place, tapping my foot impatiently. The ration desk is just ahead, its window framed by the hum of fluorescent lights. I don't know, wait a minute, he said while Daniel went downstairs. Then me, Gordon, permit office window. Down. I don't. The enforcer stands watch, his eyes scanning the room like a hawk. He taps a stylus on a datapad, occasionally glancing up to check the queue's progress. Every time he looks my way, I feel a chill. Netta, how I doing? He shouted, started up time. I count 17 people in line. We are near the end. My fingers itch with the urge to fidget, but I keep them still. I know the ration desk is my only chance to get food and essential supplies for weeks. I can't afford to miss it or risk starving by tomorrow. Fines for lateness, double each week. The queue moves forward at a glacial pace. A young mother shifts uncomfortably beside me, her child clinging to her shirt. She glances nervously at the enforcer, who gives her an approving nod before returning to his datapad. I try not to think about how close she is to my situation. The ration desk has closed early, twice this week due to overuse. A middle-aged man in a tattered coat steps up and hands over 25 credits, which the enforcer counts meticulously before stamping his permit. The man looks relieved as he scurries away, clutching his hard-won ticket. The queue inches closer. I don't care any partner. I reach into my pocket and feel the smooth, cold metal of the credit chip. My fingers close around it tighter, and I clench them to keep from trembling. I grip my ration tighter, knowing I must make it last. What is so? The enforcer's eyes meet mine for a brief moment, a silent warning. I step forward, offering my permit and credit chip. He takes them without comment, his gaze never leaving me as he stamps my permit with precision. The stamp is final. No going back now. My permit is valid for another 2 weeks. Until next Monday. The ration desk opens its slot, and I grab a ration card before slipping away to the crowd. My heart races not because of fear, but because of the stark realization that each day brings more uncertainty. The fine has doubled, and the enforcer's presence is only going to increase. I hurry back to my small apartment, the ration card crumpled in my hand. Next week, ration might not be enough for all of us. The notice board outside the housing block looms large, its metallic surface reflecting the harsh Imperial sun. A new poster catches my eye. Permits now required for all ration allocation. And the enforcer's scrutiny has escalated, and we must now register every household member. Our registrar strides up to the board with a clipboard in hand. The notice is detailed but cold. It lists the penalties for non-compliance in stark black and white. Fines double each week for lateness. I gulp, feeling the weight of our predicament. The queue snaking around the block stretches like a silver snake, each person a silent sentinel. Our registrar taps her pen against the clipboard as she scans through the names on the list. The enforcers' eyes dart from one person to another, their gaze unyielding and unsettling. Young mother stands beside me, clutching a blanket tightly around her child. A Russian regiment and a capital blow. Her face is pale, and beads of sweat glisten on her forehead. I offer a reassuring smile, but she only nods weakly in return. The enforcer's scrutiny becomes more intimidating as the queue moves closer to us. I register her, finally reaches our roll. She calls out briskly, "Next." Young mother takes a step forward, with unsteady legs. The enforcer watches her approach, their eyes never leaving hers. "Name and ID number." I register her, demands without looking up from the clipboard. Young mother fumbles in her bag, pulling out an ID card with trembling hands. I register her, snatches it and scans it quickly before scribbling something on the clipboard. She repeats the next step without looking at young mother's name. The enforcer steps closer, their presence oppressive. Their gaze rakes over us, making my skin crawl. The young mother shifts nervously, her child whimpering softly in her arms. I register her, continues to process people with the efficiency of a machine, but the enforcer's attention is unnerving. Young mother hands back the ID, her steps hesitant. The registrar turns to me. "Name and ID number," she says, without looking up. "Oh." I present my own ID card, feeling its familiar weight in my hand. I register her, glances at it briefly before moving on. The enforcer watches me for a moment longer, then turns back to the queue with a final nod of approval. The notice board continues to loom above us, its message clear: compliance is now mandatory. The implications are chilling. Every household member must be registered, and failure will mean further fines, possibly even violence. The enforcer's presence lingers in the air, a constant reminder of the Empire's iron grip. What now? A young woman stands outside the housing block notice board, her eyes scanning the list of announcements. The enforcer watches from the corner, his presence an unyielding barrier. I need to register all household members today. The new permits are required for ration allocation. And register won't wait for us if we're late. The notice board is a maze of yellow and red alerts. One in particular catches my eye: double fines for lateness. Fear gnaws at the edges of my resolve. I walk to the housing block entrance, where a queue has formed despite the early hour. Each person seems more anxious than the last, their faces tense with worry. The enforcer's gaze follows me as I approach the front desk. Ein registrar is already there, clipboard in hand and a stern expression on her face. "Name," she demands without looking up. "Mother," I reply, feeling my heart rate quicken just a fraction. She writes it down and looks up. "Household members, Hatimurdo, now Kerry, Adisho, Awatikakshe, in Mother." I hesitate. There are three of us: young mother, I enregister, and the enforcer. I decide to include them all. "Wait, sir. What's your doctor? The next the own machine. 4. Turn down. Assimilate. Or the crow. The oyster. Odd or recover down. I need eyes for everyone." She hands me an envelope with a form inside. "No. Oyster 2. Jackson Rowdy. But the perimeter dying a joy." The enforcer steps closer, his eyes boring into mine. He's watching the queue too closely, like Hart, waiting for something. I hand over the forms and hurry back outside. The queue has grown. People are whispering about fines and delays. Ein registrar isn't here yet, but she'll be along soon. Well, I find a spot near the notice board and wait. The enforcer is still there, his watchful eyes never leaving me all the other residents. The sound of boots echoes down the corridor. Mother approaches, her face pale as she glances at the enforcer. She hands over her form without hesitation. Ranger, Nernisto, Resentingeres. A few more minutes pass. Ein Registrar arrives just as I finish filling out the last form for the enforcer. She takes it with a nod and heads back inside. At an stuck inside. I watch them go, my stomach tightening. The enforcer doesn't move. He seems almost calculating in his patience. Ein Registrar returns to her post at the desk. She hands me 2 permits, one for each of us. She warns them to be on time next time, before turning away. The permit, office door, closes behind them. I clutch the papers tightly and start down the corridor, young mother trailing closely behind. The enforcer is still there, a silent sentinel. Gretchen, at an Registermarket, and Rebertan. His stare is unnerving, like he's waiting for something to go wrong. We reach our housing block without incident. Moida Breno and Anistra Herrick Wengol as we approach the entrance. Young mother hesitates. Shouldn't we wait till Ein Registrar is inside? I can manage, I say, softly. The enforcer's eyes flick toward me again, as if to say, you should fear this moment. I push open the door and step inside, young mother following closely behind. The enforcer watches us go, his expression unreadable. A young woman, Ein Registrar, steps through the dimly lit entrance of her housing block, casting a wary glance at the imposing figure of the enforcer stationed by the turnstiles. Today's shift has just begun. The turnstiles creak open with a mechanical whine, and Ein Registrar, her hand trembles as she pulls out a clipboard and pen. She quickly scribbles down her household members. Her husband, her daughter, names barely legible in the dim light. The enforcer watches intently from his position by the turnstiles. A new rule is posted on the notice board above, declaring double fines for tardiness. Ein Registrar. Stomach churns at the thought of yet another fine, added to their already meager budget. She must hurry if she wants to avoid the extra cost. The enforcer's gaze shifts from her clipboard to his watch. All set? He asks in a monotone that carries more weight than words ever could. Ein Registrar nods, clutching the clipboard tighter. She steps forward, feeling the turnstile saw cold metal against her skin. As she passes through, the enforcer's eyes follow her intently until she is out of sight. Ein Registrar reaches the other side, where a queue of residents waits for their turn to register. The woman ahead of her fidgets, her face pale as she faces the harsh scrutiny of the enforcer. Ein Registrar can see the fear in the other's eyes, a shared realization that compliance is not just about avoiding fines, but about enduring a constant state of vigilance. With a final glance at the notice board and a deep breath, Ein Registrar steps into the queue. She must do this every day, for her familiar's sake, yet each step feels like a small surrender to an oppressive system. The enforcer's eyes follow her again as she joins the line. Will they ever break free from this cycle of compliance and fear? Ein Registrar hurried through the dimly lit housing block, his breath coming in short bursts. The air was thick with the scent of mold and fear. He adjusted his patched coat, glancing at the turnstiles ahead. Registration day had finally arrived, and he knew the stakes were higher than ever. He felt the pressure of time, as penalties for tardiness had escalated. The enforcer loomed in the distance, a figure in a black cloak that seemed to watch even from this distance. Ein Registrar quickened his pace, his mind racing with all the things they might lose if he failed. Their small savings, access to food rations, perhaps even freedom of movement. He reached the turnstile, fumbling for the registration permit. His hands were shaking, slightly, as he slid it into place. The turnstile whirred and beeped, a series of green lights confirming his status. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. That's ours when I noticed the new sign hanging just above the entrance. Extended registration hours until 2300. The enforcer was already here, standing silently in the corner, his presence a constant reminder of what could happen if he failed. Ein Registerer felt a tightening in his chest as he realized how little time he had. He rushed inside, the turnstiles closing behind him with a final beat. The room was crowded with Uzzah, families huddled together, children crying softly in their parents' arms. The air conditioning hummed faintly in the background. A strange comfort among so much dread. Ein Registerer found his name on the list and quickly approached the registration desk. A gruff voice asked for identification. Not He handed over the permit, waiting nervously as the registrar scanned it. She pressed the button next to his name and said tersely, "Late." The screen flashed green before turning red. The registrar swallowed hard, reaching into his pocket for more credits. "Can't pay no more." "Can I have a pass instead?" "And you." The registrar's eyes flickered toward the enforcer, who was watching intently from the corner. She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but..." A thin metal pass was placed in front of him. It had a small chip embedded in it, glowing faintly with an encrypted signal. "Oi!" Ein Registerer held out his hand, feeling the cold metal. He knew this was just a temporary reprieve, not a solution. The enforcer's gaze lingered on him as he left the desk. As Ein Registerer stepped into the corridor, he saw more families filing in, each one burdened with their own fear and desperation. The turnstiles closed behind them, marking the beginning of another night under Imperial rule. They wondered what challenges awaited them. The dim lights of the housing block flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the crowded corridor. I stood in line at the permit office window, my heart pounding slightly as I watched the registrar meticulously input data into the terminal. "Only 1 hour left," I muttered to myself. "Not enough time." On rings. The enforcer's presence was palpable now, standing guard by the registration desk, his imposing form a constant reminder of the looming deadline. His eyes scanned the queue with an unsettling efficiency. "Oh!" The registrar called out. "Ein Registerer," her tone clinical and unchanging. I stepped forward, my fingers trembling as they approached the window. "I need a temporary pass before 2000. 300. The registrar tapped away on the terminal, her fingers moving quickly, but methodically. "What is your occupation?" What is your occupation? "Delivery worker," I replied, hoping it would expedite things. "Valid ID. Required." The registrar gestured towards the side of the desk where I knew I needed to place my identification card. I reached into my pocket and felt a familiar weight. My temporary pass, issued earlier in the week. It was due for renewal today, or so they said. Now it seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. "Sorry, but you need to register your ID for a new permit," the registrar explained, her eyes never leaving the screen. My stomach churned as I realized my temporary pass wouldn't be enough. "I just need a few more hours so." "Please, sir." The enforcer stepped closer, his presence a physical barrier. His cold gaze met mine, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "You have until 2300, he said, in a voice that left no room for argument. "All right, but how much will it cost?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant despite the rising panic inside me. The registrar typed a few more commands into the terminal. "What can I and an option rented down to terminal for a temporary permit. You'll need to pay an additional late fee of 50 credits. I stared at her, calculating in my head. In Meticulously, Newston Tonic Action. With my current funds, it was close but not quite enough. And that's when I noticed the enforcer shift his stance slightly, as if preparing for something. Can't afford the fee, I said, feeling the weight of the decision. What will happen? The registrar sighed, her expression a mix of frustration and resignation. You will be marked as non-compliant. My mind raced as the implications sank in. Alright, Gerard. Without a registration permit, my access to essential services would be restricted. I wouldn't be able to purchase food or other necessities without facing further fines. Can you give me until tomorrow? Nice, I asked, hoping for a reprieve. The registrar shook her head. I know what's in the time that can't go out. I stand right, and we're chanting but mark it up. Nine well. No extensions are available. After 2,300. I felt the weight of the enforcer's gaze bore into my back as I turned and walked away from the permit office window. The harsh reality was that tonight would be the last night I could freely move around without risk of immediate enforcement. Without another word, I left the crowded corridor, my steps echoing slightly in the empty hallway. The knowledge that tomorrow might bring stricter measures hung heavily over me. Would I be able to find the 50 credits? Or was this just the beginning of a much longer, more restrictive period under Imperial rule? The enforcer's watchful eyes lingered on my retreating form as I disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind only the faint sound of my footsteps fading away. Ein registrar's hand trembles as I trace the holographic permit on the notice board, my heart sinking at the cost of 50 credits for being late. The registrar glances up from her clipboard with a sigh. No. Or another one up, she mutters, jotting down another name in the queue list. The enforcer looms outside the door, his presence both a physical barrier and a silent threat. Ein registrar frowns at me. I nod, but I know my pockets are empty. I nod, but I know my pockets are empty. The late fee is too steep, and there rocks no time to beg for help. The notice board buzzes with the constant stream of names, hundreds since morning, each one a reminder of compliance, or else. A single name catches my eye. Lysara, woman who lost her pass last week and was forced to work overtime just to pay the fine. Ein registrar places another permit in the slot, her voice urgent but strained. Ein registrar urges herself to hurry. When I should step to work in Dundee, not today, but a next to the Christic temple. Oh. Ah. The registrar finishes up and closes the window. You have until 2,300 or you are on port face. She trails off, glancing at the enforcer. I dash past the notice board towards the exit, my mind racing. How can I afford this? My savings are already depleted from last month medical bills. I register, and I share a glance of desperation as I push through the throngs of people, each face a mix of fear and resignation. The enforcer steps closer, his breath warm on my neck. You have 1 hour, he growls. I run down the corridor, past flashing red lights and security cameras. The air smells faintly of exhaust fumes and despair. I reach the main entrance just as the clock strikes 2,100. My hand hovers over the payment terminal, fingers trembling. The enforcer blocks my path. The enforcer says, "You have until 2,300. And registrar. His face twists in a silent plea. We both know what will happen if we fail. Oh, please, I whisper, my voice barely audible above the hum of the city. His expression is cold. He says, "You'll learn." His boot presses against my foot, and I stumble, dropping the credit chip into the slot with a cling. The screen glows green, confirming payment. I dash through the doors just as they begin to close. Inside the permit office, the registrar's face is stern but kind. She hands me the permits and nods. "Oi good luck. We're up to." And registrar stands beside her, relief clear in his eyes. We both know this is not over. I'm not going. I ain't going. We feel the enforcer's gaze as we leave, his presence a constant reminder of what happens when one fails. What now? The dim light of the corridor flickered as I walked towards the permit office, the emergency pass in my pocket jingling softly. I tried to push it back into my pocket, but found no room. The stack of papers was bulky. A sign on the wall read, "Her permits must be renewed by 2,300 or face severe penalties." "Oh, registrar." Office was just ahead, a series of doors with small windows that offered a glimpse of metal desks and stern faces. Approaching the first door, I noticed it was marked Registrar. A young woman, in a crisp uniform, looked up from her papers. She wore a silver badge on her chest with the Imperial emblem. "Permit renewal?" she asked, her voice flat. "Yes," I replied, my hand already reaching for the pass. "This is an emergency." "Punctuated, and don't worry, don't. Say that to me. I will turn this out in range." She nodded and gestured me inside. The room was small, with a single desk and 2 chairs in front of it. A stack of papers sat on the edge, each one bearing the name and permit number of someone who had passed through. "Name?" she asked. "And registrar," I said, my voice slightly strained. She typed something into her terminal, then handed me a form. "Fill this out." I took it, feeling the pass in my pocket. The registrar's office was no longer an annoyance, but a looming threat. Breaking the rules meant risking severe penalties, and with my savings depleted from medical bills, I couldn't afford any more trouble. As I filled out the form, I noticed a small hidden compartment under the desk. It glinted faintly, drawing my gaze. My heart skipped a beat as I considered the implications of using it. Rash, but I had to secure this permit. There was no other choice. I finished quickly and handed the form back to her. She typed some more, then slid me another piece of paper with a barcode on it. "Take this to 2,200. For your new permit." I nodded, clutching the pass tightly. He offered me the pass one last time, asking if I wanted to use it. The registrar offered the pass one last time. "Boyetan's there if you need it." "Warning, Reservator, Parsino, Arnitanitan, Reservival, Registrara, now Yao Noon." Oi? Oh, the pass was small and unmarked. I could not see what it was made of or how it worked, but it felt like a lifeline. No. I left the office, my steps echoing slightly in the empty corridor. The metal doors shut behind me with a soft click, sealing off any escape route. I walked towards 2,200, the emergency pass clutched in my hand. I had just over an hour to secure this permit and avoid the enforcer's wrath. Time seemed to slow as each second ticked by. At 2,158, I approached the door of 2,200. The sign read "Permit Issuance." My heart raced as I pushed open the door and entered. A man in a dark uniform sat behind a desk, his face blank, but his eyes sharp. "Permit renewal?" he asked without looking up. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up from his papers, his gaze piercing mine. "Name?" "I'm Register," I replied, holding out the emergency pass. The man's expression did not change. He took it and scanned it over his terminal. His face remained unreadable as he issued me a permit and sent me on my way. I walked back to the permit office with the new permit in hand, my heart still pounding. The emergency pass was tucked safely away. I had used it, but now faced the consequences of breaking the rules. The corridor ahead loomed darkly, and I knew that 2300 was just a few steps away. My heart raced with each passing moment. Master, Kristen, I showed you out and act out and cut you out at your internet. What would happen if the enforcer found out? The corridor walls, once bright and polished, now shone with an eerie artificial glow. My reflection in the glass panel seemed distant, like looking at someone else. I hurried past the turnstiles, the metal gates hissing open to let me through. The shift change was imminent. I could feel it in the increased pressure from the enforcers patrolling the hall. They were always here now, a constant reminder of who what controlled this place. I swiped my emergency pass and inserted it into the slot, feeling the hum as it activated. The red light flickered, but no alarm sounded. I was lucky, or perhaps they'd already seen me use it. The turnstiles clattered shut behind me, a mechanical reminder of the constant surveillance. I spotted Enforcer Zane, leaning against the wall as I neared the turnstiles, his gaze following me with unnerving precision. Wow, does he always seem to be here, anchoring? What? I inserted my new permit into the slot and waited for the green light. The turnstile hummed softly as it checked the code, but it didn't open. Instead, a red alert blinked on the screen, and Zane stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Problem with your permit," he said, his voice calm, yet authoritative. I fumbled through my bag, trying to find another one, but there was only this one. I must have made a mistake, I stammered, hoping for an escape route. Zane's hand grabbed the back of my collar, pulling me closer. "Mistakes can be very costly," he growled, his breath warm against my ear. The turnstiles remained closed, and now Zane was holding on to me, a tangible symbol of my vulnerability. I felt the cold metal of his badge pressing into my side, a silent threat. What if they find out? What will happen to me then? Really? Run? Well, below. I was trapped, both physically by the gates, and socially by the enforcer's scrutiny. I faced more obstacles as I tried to leave, starting with the permit issue. The turnstiles remained obstinate, their red lights mocking my predicament. I stand in the dimly lit checkpoint corridor, a long metal pole clutched in my hand, its surface cold and unyielding against mine. The enforcer Zane looms large, his imposing presence making even the flickering light from the ceiling seem dimmer. Right? His eyes are fixed on me, an unwavering gaze that speaks volumes of unspoken threats. The rule is simple but biting. Turnstiles require valid updated permits. Zane's hand tightens on my shoulder, a subtle reminder of his authority and my compliance. He leans in close, his breath warm against my ear. "Better make it quick," he murmurs. I race to the nearest kiosk where a shift supervisor types away at a terminal, oblivious to the tension between us. Shah's typing quickly, inputting data into a system I can barely see. The rule is clear. Outdated permits result in delays and scrutiny. The number of red flags on my emergency pass is already too high. Any more, and it could be confiscated. The supervisor pauses, her eyes briefly glancing up. "You need to update your permit," she says, without looking directly at me. Zenos' grip tightens, his fingers digging into my skin. I grit my teeth, pushing back against the pain. Time is slipping away, we both know it. The turnstiles loom ahead, their red lights glaring menacingly. Time drags on, as I feel Zane's gaze upon me. I reach for the kiosk, my hands trembling slightly. As I swipe my pass and enter the required data, the screen flickers with an error message. My eyes dart between the supervisor's face and Zaina's tightening grip. "Why did go down at Kentucky count? Mine and dips." Not good, she mutters, pressing a few more keys, but not fast enough. The red turnstile lights grow brighter, their harsh glow almost blinding in the confined space of the corridor. Zane leans closer, his breath hot against my ear. Now turn it on soon. One more delay, and they'll see you're slipping, he warns. My heart races, not from fear, but from the mounting pressure to act fast. The kiosk finally beeps, confirming the update. I rush towards the turnstiles, my emergency pass flashing a green light just in time. Zinar's grip eases slightly as we approach the barriers. The turnstile blades descend with an ominous clunk, the sound echoing through the corridor like a warning. We step through, and the blades lift, allowing us to continue. I feel the cool metal of my pass in my hand. Its green light a fragile shield against Xenor's gaze. But as we clear the checkpoint, the turnstiles emit another low beep. A red light blinks, indicating an issue with my permit status. Zenizar's eyes narrow, his expression a mix of suspicion and anger. "You're not getting away that easily," he growls. The corridor ahead is suddenly filled with the sound of approaching footsteps. Enforcers on patrol. The tension in the air is thick, almost palpable. Our hearts race as we continue forward, each step resounding in the confined space, leading us deeper into uncertainty. What now? The turnstile beeped again, and Xenia's knuckles whitened around my arm. The shift supervisor stood behind me, his eyes narrowing as he watched the console. Another day, another failed permit, I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. Zane growled softly in response. The shift supervisor leaned closer, his gaze intense. "You know what happens if this keeps up." Like showing. His breath was warm on the back of my neck. "Rinse. We're in a listener, now and then, Nazala. And it seemed uneasy. Well," I swallowed hard and pulled out a fresh permit from my emergency pack. The console lit up with static for several seconds before finally accepting it. The turnstile whirred to life, but not before Zane tugged me through faster than necessary. We emerged into the checkpoint corridor, a long stretch of steel and concrete, punctuated by surveillance cameras every few meters. The air was thick with the scent of stale sweat and fear. Xenia's grip was iron tight as he pulled me down the hall. A pair of enforcers rounded the corner ahead, their polished boots clacking against the floor in measured steps. I could see the hollow identifiers on their uniforms. Zane and Shift Supervisor had both been issued new ones today. The enforcers stopped just outside our path, their eyes scanning the corridor. Shouldn't they be patrolling? I whispered to Zane, my voice barely audible, over the hum of the facility systems. Zane pressed a finger to his lips, his expression grim. "They're here for you." "Nice sterile. Don't what he sent. I glanced back at Shift Supervisor, who was now following us, his eyes never leaving the enforcers. The tension in him was palpable. He seemed ready to intervene if necessary. The enforcers stepped closer, their heavy boots drawing attention. No attention. Zeno's hand tightened on mine as they approached. "Clear," one of them said into a comlink, and they continued down the corridor without another word. I let out a shaky breath. I did not realize I was holding. Zeno's grip relaxed slightly, but remained firm. The shift supervisor fell in step beside us again. We moved swiftly through the checkpoint, but as we neared the other end of the corridor, the turnstile beeped again. This time, it wouldn't budge despite 3 attempts and a fresh permit. Panic fluttered at the edges of my thoughts, but I forced myself to stay calm. The shift supervisor reached out and inserted his own permit into the slot. After several moments of static, he finally got through. He looked back over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. "Now you're crouching, but it's sure at when the lunch." "Let's move," he said, and pulled me along with him, as if nothing was amiss. Xenia's grip tightened once more as we accelerated our pace down the corridor. The shift supervisor led us to a side entrance that was usually kept locked, but now opened without any delay. We stepped into a dimly lit service elevator. Zane punched in the code, and the doors slid shut with an ominous hiss. As it began its ascent, I could not shake the feeling of being watched, even though no one else was around. The elevator jolted to a stop on the upper level, and we emerged into another checkpoint corridor. The shift supervisor led us straight down this one, his footsteps echoing off the walls. We turned a corner and found ourselves in an access room with several doors leading out. One of them stood slightly ajar, and the shift supervisor pushed it open. Inside was a small office cluttered with old computer terminals and stacks of paperwork. "Wait here," he instructed, stepping inside before closing the door behind him. The sound of his footsteps echoed faintly from within. "Wow, Lyra." Zane pulled me closer, his presence both comforting and oppressive. We stood in silence, the only sounds being our shallow breathing and the distant hum of the facilitier's systems. The shift supervisor emerged after a few minutes, his expression grim. "You're still on probation," he said, handing Zane another permit. Zane accepted it without comment and quickly checked its validity before tucking it away. The shift supervisor warned us to be more careful as we left the office. I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. The corridor was empty again when we stepped out, but something about the way Zane moved told me he expected company any moment. The shift supervisor led us back to the main checkpoint, and we cleared it without further issues. As we walked away from the facility, I could not shake the feeling that our luck had run thin. The turnstile beeped once more as a final warning before accepting my permit. But the day was far from over, and with each step, the stakes grew higher. Zane moved down the narrow corridor, his footsteps muted by the cold metal floor. The shift supervisor's stern face loomed on the holomonitor above him as he approached the service elevator. The new identifiers in the supervisor's hand were a stark reminder of how easily one could be seen as an outsider. He stepped into the elevator, feeling the weight of the old permit clutched in his pockets. Elevator dings to a stop. Turnstile whirs into life. Zane presented his permit, but the machine flashed red and rejected it. The supervisor's cold eyes watched him as he fumbled for another identifier, this one from his colleague, narrator Dato. The new identifier was accepted, and Zane hurried through the checkpoint, his breath visible in the chill air of the facility. The corridor ahead was patrolled by enforcers, their presence a constant reminder that compliance was not optional. Zane quickened his pace, his mind racing with the thought of how easily he could be caught. Zane approached the next checkpoint, his fingers trembling as he fumbled with a new identifier. The supervisor's watchful eye followed him as he fumbled for a new identifier, his heart rate picking up just enough to make the effort seem more significant than it was. Turnstile whirs. Zane passes through, but the corridor feels tighter, more oppressive with each step. The notice board on the wall announced reduced rations and increased surveillance. The news of ration cuts was a silent threat that hung heavy in the air, making every interaction with authority. Figures feel like a potential violation. Zeneo's breath came out in short gasps as he moved through the facility, each checkpoint a reminder of his complicity in an oppressive system. He reached his destination, the service bay, where he needed to perform maintenance on the ship's navigation systems. The silence was oppressive. Only the hum of machinery broke the stillness. The supervisor's presence loomed over him like a shadow, and Zane knew that one wrong move could cost him more than just a permit. The notice board flickers with new entries: compliance or starvation. Zinar's mind raced as he began his work, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The danger was not in the overt threats, but in the subtle loss of control over his own life. Service bay doors hiss open, revealing the dimly lit interior and Zane's cautious fall. I step inside, feeling the weight of each footfall on the metal floor. The rule: all employees must present valid identifiers at every checkpoint or face severe penalties. Zane glances at me from over his shoulder. A subtle nod to keep going. The bay is bustling with workers hurrying to their tasks, but the atmosphere is tense. Supervisor looms in the background, her presence an unspoken reminder of our compliance. Navigating through the maze of machinery, I reach the main console. No, the number 37 flashes on my scanner as it prompts for clearance. My hands tremble slightly as I enter the code. The monitor lights up green and permits access. Supervisor approaches with a clipboard, her eyes scanning the bay for any signs of non-compliance. A new queue forms at the entrance, people waiting nervously for their turns to receive updated ration cards. The line stretches down the hall, a visible reminder of our precarious situation. The service bay doors hiss shut behind me, sealing off the world outside. I breathe in deeply, the stale air mixing with the scent of old oil and metal. My eyes scan the console, searching for any sign of the latest update on navigation systems. Supervisor On's clipboard taps against her palm as she stands just a few meters away. The number 37 flickers briefly before stabilizing, confirming my access to the mainframe. Zane steps closer, his presence a silent reassurance. Supervisor gives me a sharp look, but I maintain eye contact and continue my work, fingers flying over the console. Ration cards are now distributed every 3 days instead of 5, reducing our already limited supplies by 40%. But the impact is immediate. Each meal feels more precious than ever. The rule bites as Supervisor turns to Zane. Make sure everything goes up to standard, she commands. Her voice carries a warning tone, and I know the stakes are higher now. Failure means not just loss of rations, but potential reprisal for the entire staff. I focus on the screen, running diagnostics on the navigation systems. The console whirs softly as data streams in, showing minor errors that need fixing. My fingers move quickly to correct them. Supervisor Oz, eyes narrow as she watches my work, her expression unreadable. A new protocol requires all employees to report any system malfunctions within 1 hour or face punitive measures. The threat looms over us like a shadow, making every decision more critical. Zane steps closer once again, his presence a balm in the tense atmosphere. Stay sharp, he whispers softly, his voice barely audible. The service bay doors open suddenly, and a tech rushes in with a report of a critical system failure. Supervisor On's face tightens as she takes charge, her orders brisk and decisive. The tension in the air is palpable, each moment a reminder of how tightly we are all held within this system. As I continue my work, the number 37 on my scanner flashes again, confirming another successful update. But the new queue at the ration desk stretches further than before, a stark symbol of our reduced resources and the growing pressure to comply. Supervisor On's voice cuts through the noise as she reprimands another worker. This is unacceptable, she says, her tone icy. The future feels uncertain, the cost of non-compliance ever present. The rule bites again. Failure to maintain systems could result in harsher penalties or even termination. My fingers move faster on the console, but the weight of the new consequences is clear. Survival now depends not just on my work, but on everyone else, cooperation and vigilance. The lights flicker, casting an eerie blue glow over the service bay console. My fingers dance across the interface, trying to recalibrate the navigation systems before they fail completely. Supervisor's face, normally stern, but now almost menacing, looms close. Any minute now, he hisses, eyes narrowing. I tap in the diagnostics, forcing my mind to focus on code rather than the tightening noose of his gaze. The screen blinks, showing a critical error. Mechanical error. My eyes dart across the screen, searching for any overlooked detail. The console whirs louder, signaling imminent shutdown. Not good enough. Supervisor growls, reaching for me. I manage to reroute power just as the systems start to shut down. Fixed, I say, voice steady, but trembles. Supervisor's hand tightens on my shoulder. Protocol requires immediate reporting of malfunctions. He steps back, leaving me alone with the humming console and the knowledge that any future failure will come at a steeper cost. The turnstiles click, signaling shift change. The new crew looks at me warily. As I pass through, the service bay console room hummed with the low thrum of machinery, a steady drone broken only by the soft whir of a nearby droid. I adjusted my grip on the control panel, fingers tracing over the familiar layout. The protocol required immediate reporting of malfunctions, yet here I was, risking my position to keep the ship operational. I entered a command sequence, monitoring the navigation systems with a critical eye. At a critical eye. The display flickered slightly before stabilizing, but the numbers still showed anomalies. A small red dot appeared on one of the subsystems, signaling a potential crash. Protocol dictated that this be reported immediately, but I could not let it go. The ship's integrity depended on these systems. Without them, we'd be in serious trouble. The supervisor's sharp voice echoed through the intercom. "Or tech lead." I hesitated. Then the intercom crackled with the supervisor's sharp voice. "I tech lead? What are you doing?" "No. Mention Sertern. One near so. Why, I don't know when done. I don't. And there is so. What's your?" I hesitated, then hit a few more keys to override the warning. "No, Sergio. I'll stand down to morning. Just running diagnostics," I replied tersely. The red dot vanished from the display, but my heart raced as I knew it would return. Protocol required that any malfunctions be reported within 5 minutes, otherwise they could become critical issues. A new crew member approached, her eyes scanning the console room. The console room. She was a recent addition to our team, and her presence was already causing tension among the veterans. I know. Her name tag read Tech Lead, but she was not the one in charge yet. "Tech Lead?" she repeated, her tone cautious. I ignored her, focusing on the remaining issues. The clock ticked down. I needed to resolve this before the supervisor caught me. Another red dot appeared, and I had only 4 minutes left. The intercom crackled again. "Tech Lead, report to my office immediately." I cursed under my breath, knowing that missing this deadline would result in serious consequences. The new crew member watched intently, her gaze accusatory. "Systems nearly crashed," I whispered to myself. The ship's stability was hanging by a thread, and the clock was counting down. And the red dot reappeared, and with it came a buzzing alarm from the console. The supervisor's face appeared on the screen, her expression stern. "Tech Lid, explain yourself." I quickly rerouted the diagnostics, trying to mask my actions. "Everything is fine," I said, too confidently. What? The intercom buzzed again, and this time the supervisor was joined by several other senior crew members. Their faces were a mix of concern and suspicion. The tension level rose as their eyes fixed on me. "My dimension, Captain K. Many bounty could grow, and done that. Never send about. And K. At Sharon May. Tech Lead, you are violated protocol." The supervisor growled. "You risked the ship's integrity." "Oh, what? No, let down. What's it with care?" I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Well, I needed to buy more time. "It was an emergency," I stammered. "One, Sirka Danika, Rochester until outwater, or Chananastin. Nicer Charon." The systems were about to crash. The senior crew members exchanged glances. "My Togaro, I think Rakidanga, Miss Andio, Einstein Nil, Miss Sasha, Nindandaki. On board go, the Dante Nil deep tax." The new tech lead stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. We need transparency here. What exactly happened? The clock ticked down to 0 as the red dot flashed brightly on the screen. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to remain calm. Systems are stable now, I said firmly, hoping to defuse the situation. But we need a thorough review of the diagnostics protocols. The senior crew members looked at each other, their faces unreadable. The new tech lead's eyes remained fixed on me, her suspicion palpable. Protocol required immediate reporting of malfunctions, and now I was in a precarious position. The ship's integrity hung by a thread, and my actions had brought us to this point. The red dot flashed again, and the intercom buzzed with the sound of approaching footsteps. Tech lead, the supervisor called out, her tone more authoritative than ever. And you have 30 seconds before I lock you down. I stared at the screen, knowing that my actions had brought us to this critical juncture. The ship's systems were unstable, and the clock was ticking. Our technicians are complicit, she warned, her eyes piercing mine. This ends now. The service bay, console room, hummed with the low, steady thrum of systems. High-tech lead's head tilted as they examined the diagnostics again, fingers tapping on the keyboard. Critical system, 98%, red dot ray. Supervisor, I called, my voice barely above a whisper. We need to run a diagnostic. We need to run a diagnostic. Already running, came Supervisor's sharp reply over the intercom. His presence loomed in the corner of my vision, his eyes narrowing as he watched me from across the room. High-tech lead glanced up, their brow furrowing. You're sure? Yes. I shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of the malfunction. The clock ticked down. 5 minutes until I had to report this properly or face severe consequences. All right, high-tech lead, said typing quickly. Meister Merrill, narration underset. Let's see what's causing that red dot. Words, Papagway. The console flickered with data, and a series of numbers flashed by at 98%, 97%, 96%. The system was failing at an exponential rate, and the critical number continued to drop. Oh no! Critical system failure. Imminent, high-tech lead announced. We need to isolate it now. I nodded, my heart racing as I moved closer to the console. The console. How do we do that? We need to start with a full diagnostics queue. High-tech lead's fingers flew over the keyboard, initiating the process. The room was quiet, except for the hum of machinery and the faint beeping from various monitors. Supervisor watched us intently, his gaze never wavering. Critical system, 94%, high-tech lead announced, their voice steady despite the tension. I grabbed a spare diagnostic tool, my hands trembling slightly as I inserted it into the console. I'll start with this. Mr. Imperial, I'll start. Be quick. Supervisor's voice was sharp, but controlled, his eyes never leaving mine. The diagnostic process began, and the numbers started to climb again. 95%, 96%, but the critical system was still failing. Critical system, 92%, high-tech lead said. We need to isolate it now. I nodded, my mind racing as I tried to think of a way to buy more time. How about we try a partial reboot? Good idea. High-tech lead worked quickly, initiating the reboot sequence. The console lit up with new data. and the critical system number began to fluctuate wildly. 90%, 88%, 86%. The screen flickered as the reboot took hold. Critical system, 84%, high-tech lid, said, their voice calm but tense. We're losing it. Supervisor's eyes narrowed, his face a mask of impatience. You need to report this now. I nodded, my hands shaking as I picked up the intercom. Supervisor, we're running diagnostics on critical system. Get it done. Then Cyril. Supervisor barked. Then Cyril. Then London. London Conundrum milkshake. One day. The console beeped urgently, and the critical number dropped, below 80% patch wide. The screen flickered again, and a warning light flashed red. Critical system, 75%. High-tech lid worked furiously, but it was too late. The critical system failure was imminent, and we had no time to spare. Critical system failure, I said, my voice trembling as I reported the status. We need immediate backup. Silverno, Winnebill, Mrs. Summer, Karinka. Supervisor's face hardened, his eyes cold. Not soon, Gunkamartin, Mr. Igbox. Supervisor said, You are lucky our tech lead is here to help you. One more mistake like this, so. Ignition rates, your dad. The critical system failed completely, and a loud, piercing alarm blared through the room. Critical system, 0%. Isolated. High-tech lid, shouted over the noise. I nodded, my mind racing as I tried to understand what had just happened. The failure of the critical system meant more than just downtime. It could mean serious consequences for everyone involved. As Supervisor's face turned red with anger. I knew that our actions would be closely monitored from now on. The clock was ticking, and the stakes were higher than ever before. I stare at the console, my fingers hovering over the repair key. The display flickers red as the critical system fails faster than anticipated. The holographic readout blinks out of sync like a trapped spirit trying to escape its prison. Each failed cycle triggers an audit from the central control hub. Any lag could jeopardize our clearance status. A red warning light flashes on the wall panel, and a nearby tech supervisor's voice crackles over the intercom. Tech lead, report to the main console, immediately. The tension in the room is palpable, like a heavy curtain drawn across a stage. I glance at Supervisor, whose eyes are fixed on the flickering display with an unreadable expression. 5 minutes, he says, his voice calm but sharp. You know the protocol. Moinchundera, my sherry. Another protocol. I nod and quickly start, typing commands to isolate the system. The console hums with static as I work, each keystroke a desperate bid for control. The red light blinks faster now, its rhythm syncopating with my heartbeat. A soft beat from the corner of the room draws my attention up. Another tech has just been called in by the intercom. The queue is growing longer. Actually, a stack of maintenance logs leans against the wall beside me, each one a reminder of the countless hours spent trying to maintain this fragile system. Failure to meet the reporting deadline will result in mandatory personnel review and potential reassessment of our service level. The console beeps again, another failed cycle. The red light is now almost constant, a relentless heartbeat, counting down my options. I type faster, each command, a desperate whisper against the silence. 3 minutes. Supervisor says, his voice steady but strained. Tech, lead, are you ready to report? I look at the console one last time, then turn to him. Yes. The intercom crackles to life. Mr. Nanalkindali Hetman. The intercom announces tech lid. A report is needed immediately. Immediate response required. What? Supervisor nods and walks out, leaving me alone with the ticking clock and the relentless red light. Ending sentence. The red warning light continues to blink as I step into the hallway, the sound of boots echoing softly behind me. The console hums softly, its green lights reflecting off the polished metal. High-tech lid hesitated at the maintenance console, hands hovering over the control panel. 3 minutes until my report was due. Central Control Hub would be watching. Red light blinked faster, signaling imminent failure. I tapped in the diagnostic sequence, fingers moving with practiced speed. The system whined, a low growl that echoed through the narrow room. High-tech's logo flashed on the screen up, a stark reminder of our compliance. Each audit cycle was an opportunity to prove our worth. Failure meant reassignment or worse. Okay, call Q ticked up another 2 alerts. The queue had always been there, but now it felt like a physical weight pressing down. Every beep and ping was a reminder that I wasn't just a tech lead. I was part of the system's intricate web. If I failed, they would find someone who could make their numbers look better. Red light. Beeper intensified. I needed to isolate this failing component before Central Control noticed. The procedure dictated a cautious approach, but there were no protocols for this level of urgency. Now, my eyes darted to the clocker. Only 2 minutes left until mandatory review. Dutch Civil. A small monitor flickered with static. High-tech surveillance footage was always on, an ever-present eye watching my every move. It wasn't fear that gripped me, it was a creeping dread, a slow burn of anxiety. Red light blared. Mid-sim, Hardstowing, Mission Copy Canal, Brendan Mazimo. I reached for the diagnostic tool and quickly inserted it into the system. The console whined louder as I began to trace the failing circuit. The beeps grew more frantic as time seemed to stretch on endlessly. The monitor suddenly went dark, plunging me into brief darkness before a single pixel flickered back on. Central Control surveillance had failed too. Red light beaconed. Well, said Renko, our histo, or each cell, narration, on this style, window or name. High-tech's protocols required immediate isolation of critical systems. I typed in the command and watched as the screen turned solid red up. Failure confirmed. The system groaned louder, an anguished moan that seemed to resonate through the entire building. Red light blinked rapidly, and I should have seen my turn. I'll branch Suwan. I'll tell. We're not lying. The tech call queue had reached critical mass. People were panicking now, their voices blending into a cacophony of worry and frustration. High-tech was built on reliability. Failure meant falling behind, and falling behind meant scrutiny from Central Control. High-tech's logo flashed once more, a harsh, unyielding reminder. The room grew colder, the air thick with tension. Every beep was a warning, every monitor, a surveillance eye waiting to record my mistake. Red light continued its frantic blinking. What if they found me? What would happen then? What? The console whined one final time before going silent. High-tech's failure was now Central Control's problem, but the cost of my compliance had only just begun. The Central Control Hub flickers with the dull red glow of warning lights, casting an eerie light through the maintenance room. High-tech's lead tech Jackson leans closer to the AI monitor, his fingers poised over the console. Red light blinks rapidly, signaling imminent failure and exposure. A queue of techs and workers stretches along the corridor outside, their faces a mix of concern and resignation. The turnstiles hum softly as they cycle through the crowd. Jackson ahs. Eyes scan the screen, his brow furrowed deeply. Tech call coup reached critical mass Jackson mutters, fingers dancing across the console. Jackson types out commands with precision, buying precious seconds until the next audit review. But the room is filled with the low hum of machinery and the faint whirring of the AI monitor. A worker in a dirty lab coat approaches the turnstiles, his face pale. Tech here, he says quietly. Jackson nods, without looking up. You don't need to wait your turn. Oh, next. The queue continues to grow, the pressure palpable as more and more people seek access to critical systems. Jackson asks, fingers pause on the keyboard, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. Red light blinks rapidly, signaling imminent failure and exposure. Jackson swallows hard, his grip tightening on the console. The stakes are rising. If this fails, he faces not just reassignment, but potential violence from central control. His colleagues are. Fate hangs in the balance as well. The monitor screen displays a message. Access granted for maintenance. Jackson quickly logs into the failing system and begins to work, his movements steady despite the mounting tension. Alarms flash urgently as the system teeters on the brink of collapse. A tech call comes through, urgently. It's Imperial Grad. I mentioned to the now, and I know tower. No, Jackson asks, fingers move with grim determination, but the queue is growing ever longer. The turnstiles continue to cycle. Each worker, a reminder of the strain on ITECAS, resources under Imperial rule. The red light continues its rapid blink, a relentless pulse of impending disaster. Red lights flicker ominously, casting an eerie glow over the maintenance room. Jackson stands by the console, his fingers poised over the interface. The tech call, queue stretches like a snaking river, each worker adding to the pressure with their approach. The rule. Central control monitors every access attempt. Any delay could mean exposure. A worker in dirty overalls shuffles up to the turnstile, his steps slow and hesitant. The queue is already at critical mass. Jackson can feel the tension building like an unseen force. He glances at the rapidly blinking red light on the mainframe a sign of imminent failure. The consequence: each additional worker delays the inevitable exposure to central controller surveillance. Our permission to enter. Sarah, the worker whispers. Jackson hesitates, his hand hovering over the access code. The queue grows thicker, voices muffled by the hum of machinery and the whir of droids. He types in the code, his fingers trembling slightly. The turnstile clicks open, but not before another worker steps up to join the line. The room feels smaller now, claustrophobic with the weight of impending disaster. Jackson's breath catches as he realizes central control might have already noticed the delay. He quickly checks the diagnostics, his eyes scanning for any signs of failure. A soft ping from a nearby sensor draws his attention. He turns an anomaly, something unexpected on the system. Jackson frowns, trying to decipher its meaning amidst the chaos. The rule bites. Any irregularity will be flagged by central control as suspicious activity. Another worker shuffles forward, their steps loud in the sudden silence. Jackson's heart plummets, recognizing the impending sequence of events. The red light blinks faster, signaling imminent failure. He needs to act fast. Jackson reaches for his toolkit, grabbing a spare part and hurriedly replacing it in the console. His hands move with practiced speed, but the queue continues to grow, each worker adding another layer of potential exposure. The turnstile opens again, this time to a droid carrying a maintenance log. The queue now includes machines and men, all contributing to the growing risk. Jackson's fingers fly over the interface, his mind racing as he tries to cover up the anomaly. A sudden jolt runs through the system. The red lights blinks out, then reignites with renewed intensity. Panic threatens, but Jackson forces it down. Arms. He needs clarity now, more than ever. Reduction road down. It's only done, and I've still had it fine. Your wish to oversing down. It's the answer. The rule. Central Control will analyze every access attempt for patterns and anomalies. Failure could mean severe repercussions. Jackson's mind races as he works, each moment stretching into an eternity of dread. The queue continues to grow, the workers pressing forward like a relentless tide. His fingers move with increasing urgency, until finally the system stabilizes. The final sentence. The red light flickers back on, a constant reminder of the precarious balance between survival and exposure. Red light flickers, signaling an impending failure. Jackson fidgets, his fingers drumming against the cold metal of the tech call queue. Workers murmur around him, their eyes darting nervously. I step closer to the permit office window, scanning the crowded queue. The red light blinks once more, louder this time. I can't let them see me here. Central Control monitors every access attempt. Another worker approaches the counter, and the queue stretches further. The queue seems to stretch on forever, each moment heightening the danger. Jackson! A voice whispers behind me. What's taking so long? I turn to workers, his eyes wide with concern. Just hold on, I mutter, keeping my tone steady. We need this fix. Missionary, unreachable, monocritical, outline, identigraph it only. We're dice. The red light blinks again, and I curse silently. I don't convention so to card, watch younger show, and right it from district dog show. Central Control will notice the anomaly soon if we don't act fast. My fingers tighten around the permit form, already feeling the weight of complicity. I can roll my weight of complicity. A knock at the window startles me. I look up to see maintenance worker looking through the glass, her face a mix of urgency and fear. We need your help, she whispers urgently. I sigh, knowing there's no time for politeness. All right, let's go. Why don't go? Nick Cherry, I can't show. We slip into the tech room, the queue now a snarl of bodies and tension. Central Control monitors every access attempt for patterns and anomalies. Time wasted means more risks. The red light blinks twice more before finally going darker. Temporarily, I hope. Maintenance worker fiddles with a console, her hands shaking. We need to reroute power, she says, voiced barely above a whisper. But it arms, not just the usual suspects. I nod, taking over the controls. The room hums with machinery, and the faint smell of coolant fills my nostrils. We can't afford any mistakes, I say, my heart racing. No, I need to change out, then I can make an heart rate. The system fails to respond as expected, and a warning signal blinks on the screen. Quick, clean syndrome. Inside, dynamic query. Always valid view. I shout, pressing buttons frantically. The queue outside grows longer, the workers' whispers growing louder. Central Control will see this soon. They monitor every access attempt for patterns and anomalies. The red light flickers again, signaling another potential disaster. I can't let them win. On. Not now. Much to there, and never down. Naturally. Workers and I work in unison, our fingers moving over controls with practiced speed. Another minute, another worker added to the queue. The stakes are higher than ever. My own turn. The system finally stabilizes, but the warning signal still blinks. Central Control will notice this soon. I glance at maintenance worker, her face pale with fear and determination. We made it, she whispers, but I know the danger isn't over yet. The red light blinks once more, signaling another potential failure. My heart races as I realize how close we've come to exposure. Time is against us. Every new recruit raises the stakes of discovery. The queue outside stretches like a noose around us, and Central Control watches every move. What now? She asks, her voice barely audible. I take a deep breath, the room humming with tension. Now we keep working, I say, my voice steady but filled with dread, and hope they don't notice. Tech room lights hummed in an endless monochrome, casting shadows on the metal tables and equipment. Meticulously, I, Nater, adjusted my tunic to hide the slight tremor. The queue outside stretched like a long, impatient tail. Workers moved with grim efficiency, their faces blank as they typed into terminals. Central control had increased surveillance. Every keystroke was scrutinized. Central control has initiated an emergency audit. One of them announced over the intercom. All techs must report to your assigned stations immediately. Immediately, Ionator glanced at the red light, blinking ominously on a nearby console. The system's warning signal remained active, even as it briefly stabilized. I had to act fast. Can you reroute power to Sector 7? I asked the worker next to me if he could reroute power to Sector 7. It's failing again. Workers 1 hesitated, then nodded and began typing feverishly. Central control was monitoring every keystroke now. Any mistake could be a violation. The queue outside grew longer, workers shuffling impatiently. The notice board flickered with new housing block assignments, each one more urgent than the last. Rerouting complete, workers, one said breathlessly after what felt like an eternity. But we need to check Sector 7 manually. What actually turned up, whatever that delay. Nater followed him through a maze of corridors, our footsteps echoing softly in the otherwise silent tech room. Central control's red light flickered ominously, a constant reminder of our failure. Sector 7 was dark, and I could feel a chill that wasn't from the air conditioning. The warning signal blared louder as we approached. Workers 1 fumbled with the controls, his fingers shaking slightly. Got it, he said, but the light remained stubbornly red. Maybe it's central control, I suggested, though I didn't want to believe it. Workers 1 hesitated, then nodded grimly. They know something is wrong. Sir, I've finished this anycary, or now to go up count. Or something wrong, so, yeah, and I'll cut. Nater checked the notice board again. More assignments, more urgency, louder. Every day brought new demands, and every failure meant deeper complicity with an oppressive regime. The red light continued to flash, a silent accusation in the darkened sector. I knew that if we couldn't fix this soon, our lives would change for the worse. But how much further could we go before central control found us out? The light from the central console flickers ominously, casting long shadows on the walls of the tech room. Ionator adjusts his stance, muscles tense beneath his uniform. I lean closer to the control panel, my fingers hovering over a few critical switches. The red light on the console has been steadily growing more intense, and I can feel Workers 1's anxious gaze from across the room. Something's not right, I mutter under my breath, adjusting my helmet strap. He sees an error message on the console's display. Critical system failure. A queue of technicians waits outside, each one staring at their personal Omni devices for updates. The techs are. Faces carry a mix of impatience and dread. Ionator glances over at the central monitor, where a red light blinks more urgently than before. We need to reroute power up. I say, my voice steady but tense. Workers 1 nods grimly. But every time we make a change, central control gets wind of it. The techs outside the room murmur incoherent complaints. Time seems to slow as tension builds inside the room. My turn to go. Now it helps. I push the power switch, and the console ass display glows briefly before going dark again. What? Another failure, I mutter, my fingers trembling slightly as they hover over another switch. Workers, one steps closer, his voice low. Harry. We cannot keep this up much longer. If Central Control notices, that will increase surveillance. The red light on the console blinks faster now, like a warning beacon. The techs outside exchange worried glances and retreat further away from the entrance, their footsteps echoing softly in the room. I initeras. Voice is urgent but controlled. We need to find another way. What if we can reroute the power through a hidden pathway, bypassing Central Control? The console blinks again, more insistently this time. I feel a chill run down my spine as I realize that any further failure could mean even tighter scrutiny. Let's try. The manual override, work as one, suggests. I nod and begin typing on the keyboard with deliberate care, trying to keep a steady rhythm. The console's display shows a green light, but it quickly turns red again. The techs outside have already dispersed, their footsteps growing fainter. Central Controller. Red light continues its ominous blink, like an angry eye watching us from above. Or maybe we should back off for now. Or work as one, says quietly. I stare at the console, my fingers hovering over the switches. The red light blinks once more, a final warning before it goes out completely. Really? If they already know, what? Whisper, my voice barely audible. The room falls silent, except for the soft hum of machinery. The red light flickers one last time, and then stays off, signaling another failure. The techs outside are long gone, leaving us alone in the empty tech room. No. Central Controller's red light remains ominously dark, a silent judge of our complicity. A single, unanswered question lingers. What if they already know? The shift change in the tech room is always tense, especially when someone needs to make covert changes. Workers one steps through the turnstiles, his footsteps echoing faintly. The central monitor's red light blinks faster, a steady pulse of failure. Status report, I mutter, under my breath, glancing at the console. Power rerouting is critical. Workers 1 looks over, his expression unreadable. Central Control will notice every change, he warns softly. Punch out, Myron. He warns softly. I nod, focusing on the task. The techs are already uneasy. Any more disruptions, and they might withdraw their support entirely. Central Control's eyes are everywhere, watching for even the slightest deviation from protocol. With a deep breath, I reroute the power supply to avoid detection. A small number appears on my screen. 45 seconds before Central Control locks down. The monitor's red light blinks faster, the countdown accelerating. Try not to touch anything, Workers 1 advises, as he begins his own task nearby. I can't help but glance at him. His presence is both a reassurance and a reminder of the fragile balance we maintain. A single mistake could shatter it all. Central Control's red light blinks so fast now, I fear it might trigger an immediate response. Tension crackles in the air, each moment stretching into infinity. The central monitor's screen flickers once more before settling on a critical failure message. Redundant systems down. A cold dread settles in my chest as the techs around us murmur uneasily. Central Control is watching, and this time they won't be fooled easily. The tech room hummed with the quiet precision of machinery. I stood by a control panel, my fingers hovering over switches. Workers 1 bustled around, their faces tense as they checked systems. Redundant power lines flashed red, signaling failure. Central Controller's countdown. Timer ticked down from 43 seconds. The techs paused, glancing at each other with unease. I pressed a switch, rerouting the flow of energy to cover my changes. The screen confirmed success, but I knew it was temporary. Redundancy was designed for redundancy, and now one line was failing faster than expected. Workers one sighed, rubbing her temples. "We can't keep this up forever," she muttered. Her earpiece crackled with Central Control's announcement. 4 minutes left. Nym. Wow. A queue of techs formed their faces pale as they waited to be cleared by the security checkpoints. I knew what that meant. Every failed system was a step closer to my own redundancy. I adjusted the settings on another console, hoping to buy more time. The screen flickered off. Warning light blinked once before going out. Central Controller's countdown dropped to 39 seconds. Workers 1 glanced at me, her eyes pleading. "We need to tell them," she said softly. "Tell who?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, then nodded towards the door. "The control room. They can override this." I hesitated, knowing it would be seen as defiance. The cost was clear. If Central Control caught me, Yard face immediate sanctions or worse. "Go," I whispered, pushing her out the door. Central Controllers. Countdown ticked to 35 seconds. The techs behind us grew restless, whispering about ration cuts and potential layoffs. The air conditioning hummed louder, a constant reminder of the Empire's suffocating presence. A second warning light blinked on the screen. None distress. 32 seconds left. Maydo. I'd made a mistake. I was running out of time. Workers 1 reappeared, her face drained of color. "They aren't coming," she said breathlessly. "I know. We need to get out." I nodded, my fingers already working the controls. The door slid shut as Central Controller's countdown hit 0. A green override light illuminated our too. Late. The techs surged towards me, their faces a mix of fear and desperation. I could not run. They would see it as insubordination. My only option was to stand my ground and confront the unknown. A message from Central Control flashed on the screen. "Critical systems failure detected. The door locked, sealing us in with the failing systems. "Everyone stay calm," I said, my voice steady but hollow. "We hand'll work through this together." Workers 1 nodded, her eyes fixed on me. Together she echoed, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. The room grew colder, the air stale and heavy with tension. Well, the final warning light flickered twice before going out completely. Initiating lockdown protocol. Central Control's calm, yet insistent voice declared. "No more." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. What did they have planned now? The techs huddled closer, their breath visible in the cool air. "Let's see how long we can hold this," I said, my voice firm. "We are not going down without a fight." "Nein, go. Tell sitter kan bento. Isting no back and get couldn't be bad then shall. Nisting, and I should come back come now." That's the all. The room went silent, except for the faint hum of machinery, and I knew the clock was ticking. How much longer could we keep them at bay? "Right so, and so much now." Down my oxygen at bay. The answer hung in the air, a stark reminder of our vulnerability. When the final warning light blinked once more, before finally settling into darkness, sealing us inside with no escape. Archeron Central Control's tech watched the final warning light pulse red, casting an eerie glow on the control panels before me. The countdown timer was at 0. "Countdown. System lock initiated. The automated voice intoned, its monotone as chilling as ever. The room filled with a low hum that grew louder by the second. I imagine no mistakes. The air conditioning hissed faintly, a sound that now seemed out of place in this tense atmosphere. The techs around me started to murmur, their faces pale under the harsh lights. Some began to check their emergency protocols, fingers racing over the consoles. Central Control's security cameras swept across the room, catching every blink and hesitation. I worker on Central Control. Tech glanced at the intercom. Central Control, I said into it, voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. We need a delay for system recalibration. I think I can, but I know I can't go out. The response was immediate, but icy. Oh. The response was curt and negative. Proceed with lockout. Proceed with lockout. The line clicked dead. I turned back to my console and tapped the red button, initiating a soft override on one of the less critical systems. A low whirring started, barely noticeable over the growing hum. This was our last chance to stall. Line more attention. Now to me, Derek. A tech nearby muttered something under his breath, likely about how this would cost us our jobs. I kept working, my fingers flying over the controls as I initiated a backdoor protocol that would keep the power running for at least another cycle. It was a risky move, but better than nothing. The cameras zoomed in on me, their lens like hungry eyes. Panic began to simmer just below the surface. It would not be long before they caught me red-handed. The whirring grew louder, and with it came a sense of relief. The override worked. For now, Central Control's voice returned, this time more urgent. Central Control's voice ordered urgently. Report to your designated lockdown cell immediately. I worker on tech. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral as I acknowledged the command. Acknowledged, I replied evenly. Miss Rodell, is sharing and Dr. Crate. The techs around me started to shuffle towards the door, their faces a mix of fear and resignation. I followed, the whirring in my ears growing louder with each step. I worker on Central Control. Tech reached the door and stepped inside the small cell. The walls were cold metal, and the air was thick with the scent of ozone. A single light bulb flickered above, casting everything in a harsh clinical glow. The final warning light blinked red one last time before going dark entirely. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. I worker on Central Control. Tech stared at the door as it locked into place, a stark reminder of our loss of freedom. What now? The notice board in the corner was covered with posters, each one more ominous than the last. I worker on Central Control. Tech glanced at them, then back to the console before her. The digital clock on the screen blinked 5:23, and a red alert flashed briefly as part of the ongoing recalibration protocol. .safe. The system had just initiated another level of redundancy check, one that was supposed to be automatic, but now required manual override. The tech knew. This meant something critical was about to fail if they didn't comply. I worker on Central Control. Tech hit the backdoor key sequence, shard memorized, and watched as a hidden menu popped up. The protocol would run slower than usual, giving them just enough time to save what mattered most. But it came with a price. Her job was on the line if this didn't work. Security officers stood guard outside their cell, their presence unflinching. Surveillance cameras buzzed quietly overhead, their lenses trained like eyes in the dark. The Tekar's breath caught as she saw one of them pan across to focus on her console. She typed quickly, fingers dancing over the keys. A series of diagnostics ran, each one confirming that critical systems were indeed at risk. The tech could not help but think about the time when she had a choice. Now, There was only compliance or chaos. The notice board in the corner flickered again, and another poster stuck out high, a red one with white text. Central Control Lid's Texer, your silence protects us. A beep echoed through the cell as the recalibration protocol began to run properly. The tech exhaled, but it was a shallow breath. You know not gone and lingering. I need still a rustic we. I don't tell you. The notice board's persistent glare seemed to mock her, reminding her of the choice she had made. The tech turned back to her console and watched the system stabilize. For now, at least the critical core systems were safe. An upcoming audit loomed on the horizon, inevitable and unwelcome, and when it did, there would be no hiding behind silence. The notice board's red poster loomed before her again, a silent warning of what was to come. I stand in the dimly lit cell room, surrounded by rows of blinking security cameras and the faint hum of the central control system. The red poster on the notice board taunts me with its bold text. Nerd alert. Compliance audits due today. Only me. The protocol runs slower than usual, giving us just enough time to override it. I navigate through the interface, my fingers moving methodically over the keyboard. Each keystroke is deliberate, as if the system itself watches my every move. A queue forms outside the door. Workers from other departments mill around, their faces tense with anticipation. The security officer on duty glances at his watch and mutters something to himself, adjusting his stance. The protocol recalibration screen pops up, and I begin to input the necessary commands. Time stretches out in slow motion, as each step takes longer than it should. Sweat beads on my forehead, despite the cool air conditioning. Suddenly, a voice crackles over the intercom. On, report to security office immediately, and my heart sinks. This is not part of protocol. I rush toward the door, the queue closing behind me, as if sealing off another choice. The officer's stern face appears in the viewport, his eyes scanning my ID card. Protocol, override failed. He states flatly, comply with orders. From now on, he commands. I still, I'll turn in the peril. I nod, my hands trembling slightly, as I follow him to the security office. The door clicks shut behind me, and the silence is oppressive. He asks, his voice calm, but authoritative. He asks, his voice calm, but authoritative. System glitch, I lie, hoping it starts enough. The officer studies my face for a moment, before nodding. Understood. Now, I feel the weight of their words, knowing I'll be under close watch from now on. I force a smile, the cold metal of the door pressing against my back as we move further into the security office. A new fact: compliance is not an option anymore. The red poster's meaning has shifted, no longer just about audits, but about control and compliance. What choices do I have left? Red dawn breaks, casting long shadows through the facility's narrow corridors. I stand at the turnstile, the chill of the metal frame against my fingers as I swipe my ID card. The guard behind me nods curtly. Protocol recalibration demands strict compliance. The turnstile hums softly, granting passage. The platform clock shows 1:32 until the next shift change. I hear the overhead intercom crackle with static, and a voice cuts through the noise. Attention all workers, your compliance is now in force. Those not in uniform will face immediate disciplinary action. Newton, Trowlener, McCurry. I hurry past the security guard, who eyes me with practiced disdain, but says nothing. My heart races slightly, but I keep it under control. Fear is not an ally here. In my office, A red poster looms on the wall. Imperial control over workers. Eton's a stark reminder of the new order. A compliance officer peers over his desk, scrutinizing me with cold eyes. A queue forms outside the turnstiles as workers arrive for their shifts. The guard at the entrance is stricter than ever, and I notice more compliance officers patrolling the hallways. Every delay costs precious time. I rush to my station, fingers flying over the console. The protocol override sequence demands precision. A single mistake could trigger a lockdown. I enter the command, feeling the weight of each keystroke. The screen lights up with a green success message, but my relief is fleeting. The intercom crackles again, with a warning about monitoring shifts for compliance. Any deviation will result in permanent monitoring.